Senator, what are the Chinese trying to do in the South China Sea? They appear to be stealing the whole ocean.
I think that they're trying to realize their many centuries ambition to be the dominant force in the region. I don't think there's any doubt that with this latest action of theirs, which has been accelerated over the last couple of years, as you know, they are asserting in violation of all international law, a sovereignty in a part of the world where about 60 to 70% of the world's economy travels. I was once told by Lee Kuan Yew, the former great pioneer leader of Singapore, that the Chinese will dominate the Western Pacific, and they will tell us that we can have our way in the Eastern Pacific. And finally, they view, as you know, they view the last 200 years as aberrations of history and a contradiction to their many centuries years old being the dominant power in Asia.
There's something fiendish, though, about taking an atoll, something that is underwater or at water level, at a low tide level, and building it into an island and then claiming it as sovereign territory. I'm not aware that that's ever been pulled off by any country, ever.
No, but they're certainly getting away with it. I mean, just to show you how bizarre this administration is, when we finally sailed a ship within the 12-mile limit, it was widely publicized throughout the world, and the Secretary of Defense appeared before the Armed Services Committee. He was asked about that, and he said he couldn't confirm it. So I, as chairman, said, why would you not confirm something that's all over the media? Why would you do that? And he kind of equivocated again. In the New York Times the next day, it said that they didn't want to, quote, confirm it because it would jeopardize the climate change talks with China. I mean, this is just really bizarre.
Is there leverage we can bring to bear somewhere else in our relationship with China that can cause them to back off this extraordinary act of aggression, in fact, towards their neighbors, towards Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, all of these other countries that surround the South China Sea? And of course, Japan, if you extend it into the East China Sea.
Well, first of all, as you know, the Chinese just announced they're going to construct another aircraft carrier. There is no better indication of an ambition to be able to have the ability to project power than the acquisition of an aircraft carrier. The good news is that the Chinese have alarmed their neighbors to a point where they are now coalescing with us in a way that a few years ago we wouldn't have think was possible. The Japanese and the Koreans finally have resolved this comfort women issue, which plagued their relationship for years. I just met with the foreign minister and defense minister of the Philippines. There was a decision made by the Philippine Supreme Court, which will allow them to be much more active with us, military exercises, even rotational bases, maybe. The Chinese behavior has united the ASEAN countries in a way that years ago we would not have thought possible. And even though people, the conventional wisdom of the Chinese see around the corner of history and take the long view, well, they have alienated and alarmed literally every one of their neighbors, not the least of which is the Vietnamese.
We've had this rather tepid response with the freedom of navigation, and as you described it, you know, sort of denying it, or that we'd even sent a ship through. Now we have a new dimension, which is the aerial one, where Vietnam is having its airspace violated, while China says, no, no, this is all Chinese airspace now, because they have a property out there, way down to 2,000 kilometers away or something in the South China Sea. What should our response be to this?
Well, of course we should condemn it for what it is. And by the way, the Philippines have a case before the court now, International Court concerning Chinese violations. And since the Chinese have said they would disregard any verdict, I think we know what the likely verdict is. But we have to strengthen those alliances. We have to have more training, such as we have at the base in Australia, where we rotate in and out, not the old conventional base with the school and the hospital, but rotation in with of various units with training and exercises, closer relations with them, and condemnation through the Chinese are sensitive to world opinion. And finally, if it's absolutely necessary, then we need to look at some of our relationships with China. It is unacceptable for any nation to act in violation of all international law, which they did when they filled in these islands and now obviously have weaponry and have landed aircraft on it.
This has multiple impacts, one of which is environmental. Apparently these are very sensitive areas. You've got a very large and very important fishing area. You know, something like a quarter of the world's shipping passes through the South China Sea. Is there no leverage outside of the alliance? Is there no leverage we can bring to bear, quite separate? I mean, we have a lot of dealings with China. China needs us. We keep selling them things and buying things they make. Couldn't we find in that some way of bringing them to heel, as it were?
I think there are ways that we need to explore, but I would argue the first step is to unite the countries in the region, using regional forums such as ASEAN to work in a more cooperative fashion. For example, again, the Philippines are going to triple their spending on defense. We are now committed to helping them acquire maritime capability. In the last defense bill, we lifted any restriction on maritime military equipment from the Vietnamese so that they will have more capability. In other words, there's a lot going on.
Vietnam is especially affected in the Spratly
Absolutely.
Islands. Feels very, very vulnerable to China.
The Vietnamese are, frankly, our new best friends. And that is because not only is there a threat now, but they have a history. For 2,000 years, they were part of China. At least the Chinese allege that. So they feel particularly vulnerable. And they are building up their military, and now we will be able to help them acquire maritime capabilities that they very badly need.
Senator McCain. Senator, why is China making this move now?
There's a variety of reasons why China is acting now. One is perception of American weakness. What happened in the Middle East, in the Syria Red Line, and other behavior reverberates around the world, including, by the way, in Ukraine. Second of all, I think that they have now reached a stage militarily. Remember, Deng Xiaoping had 5 priorities, and military was the last one. They're now pursuing that 5th priority, to wit, the aircraft carrier that we just mentioned.
The aircraft carrier, and also the largest Coast Guard vessels ever built by any Navy.
They are in the mode of not only becoming a maritime power, but being the superior force in the Western Pacific. There is no doubt about that. But let me also point out, China's economy is in trouble, their climate, and be in Beijing someday when you can't see a block. They're growing older because of the one China policy. There's a lot of challenges that China faces, but I don't think there's any doubt that the present ruler is carrying on in the tradition of Deng Xiaoping. And I know there's a lot of corruption in China, but a lot of the persecutions have been rather selective, and those who have been indicted or even imprisoned were possible competitors to the present president of China. So They are measured and they're doing things, but they're not succeeding in, I believe, doing anything but in the long run, just frightening and causing a reaction throughout the region and alliances that you and I would not have contemplated 10 years ago.
So you think that we can contain them with alliances? Some people have talked about an equivalent of NATO in Asia, which seems not quite fitting and a very extreme thing to do.
I don't think that they would favor the kind of NATO. Remember, NATO was formed when the shadow of the Soviet Union was literally on their doorstep. But I do believe there's cooperative agreements. I do believe that now you're going to see China and Japan and South Korea working very closely together. And don't forget India. They've now got a prime minister in India who is very interested in Indian sovereignty, and there is these areas where both Indian and Chinese interests are at loggerheads. So again, I don't think the Chinese are going to win over time, and I don't think they're going to act militarily. But the reactions have to be solidarity amongst all these nations there.
Do you think any action we take in concert with the other countries of Asia will cause the Chinese to withdraw from the militarized islands?
I think joint exercises, I think assisting them with to militarize their navies, which some of them are very badly lagging. I think with cooperation, I think with our base in Australia, that's a model for other countries to have bases.